All right, so let's talk about Robert Roberts. Robert Roberts is a prominent figure in the Boston community, and he was a huge activist for equal rights and the abolition of slavery. He had a huge emphasis on access to education, which is actually something that he passed on to his son, who would later go on to actually sue the Boston school system based on segregation. And so Robert Roberts was really a prominent figure in this conversation because he was actually the first African American to have a commercially published book. And he actually wrote a book concerning house management, and it's called The House Servants Directory. And this book really outlined not only just the basics in terms of how to run a household, how to present yourself, as well as how to manage your employer. It went into very specific details that Roberts believed would aid young Black men in being able to not only navigate but succeed in a white-dominated world. And so within his book, which was actually later reprinted another 4 times, he outlined that he believed, you should be properly presented in terms of, clean nails, having manicured hair, even making sure that your breath smelled good. And if you didn't, he had remedies for you. And so Roberts found his way into the prominent Boston scene by being the head butler at the governor of Massachusetts at the time, the Gore Place. At the Gore Place, where he was able to take the teachings that he outlined in his book and put them into practice. His book became so well known that it actually went, not only did it become almost like the textbook that you read if you were going to be a servant, it went outside of the realm of servants and actually began to inform the public at large in terms of how to behave around wealth and American elites. And I really enjoyed really looking into his contributions to the ideals of hospitality, because he was really urging for people to start to look at and judge character based on class as opposed to skin color. He also wanted to make sure that people who were once enslaved, who may now be finding themselves as servants, which was one of the first real professions that became available to free Black men, that they didn't just do their jobs, but they did their jobs well, and they took dignity and they had pride in what they did. He wanted to create a professionalism about service that noted how much knowledge and what artistry it was to be a good server and to create a seamless service. And I think that this is just something that we hear even to this day, in the hospitality industry, we still hold ourselves to these same standards, even in terms of level plating, where we have lighting, the idea of not making too much noise when clearing plates, the whole chest to guest approaching from the left side. These are still attributes that we see today, every single day. I know as a server, whether you are serving in dive bar or a fine dining steakhouse, you will hear the tenets of what Robert Roberts outlined in that very first book written back in 1827. I think it's also interesting to have this conversation because Roberts is sometimes criticized for instructing the Black community to remain subservient to their white employers. And that is one way of thinking of it, because he did, emphasize that he didn't think that you should act back with anger or hostility towards an employer who may not be respecting or acknowledging your hard work. But he, I think, was giving the Black community more agency in that you have the ability to harness individuals and harness difficult personalities, as he would say. And they did think that he was referencing a particular boss of his that was known to have a difficult personality, to say the least. And I think we can all empathize with the idea of not only just having a bad day, but sometimes having less than desirable bosses or work environments. We've all been there. So being able to be in those not so wonderful work environments, but still take dignity in what you do because you're good at what you do, and what you do well. He took it a step further to say, even when you have these unruly personalities, that we have the ability to harness them. So he gave the example of when your employer would drink too much, that he actually had a trick that once they got a couple drinks in, he knew things were going to start to get sour. He would actually soak anchovies or sardines in the drink before giving it to his employer as a means of turning them off the drink. And so I think it just really speaks to, again, that art idea of artistry, and that we have the ability to talk back. He did not believe that having aggression towards your employer was necessary. He believed that there were strategies for managing difficult personalities. And I think that we can all resonate with that.